Good morning once again to everyone. My name is Evie Martin. I'm the lead pastor here at Plattwoods Church. I welcome all of you here in this space, and also a special welcome to those of you worshiping with us online this morning. Last Sunday night, I slept weird, and I woke up Monday morning unable to turn my head to the right without debilitating pain shooting through my head and all the way down my spine. It took me out for 2 full days, like completely incapacitated. Could barely function, an entirely worthless human being. It's still not quite right. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Sleep becomes treacherous as our bodies age. We don't know what parts of our body will work properly when we wake up. Others of you, well, you can laugh now, but time is coming for you. I'm a little better now, thanks for asking. Not 100%. And in those days of discomfort and turning my entire body to look in any direction, I quickly became much more appreciative and grateful for the ease with which I typically swivel my neck. It was the experience of pain and the removal of something that I took for granted that caused me to pause and give thanks for it. I have not celebrated nearly 180 degrees of rotation so joyously as I do today. I'm thankful. I'm also taking pillow recommendations. Today we wrap up our sermon series, Psalms of Psummer. Over the course of this month, we have visited the book of Psalms right in the middle of our Bible to reclaim the rich language of prayer that it offers to us. So often in my own prayer journey and in conversations with people of faith who are trying to grow in prayer, we experience the challenge of simply not knowing what to say. What words can we use to speak to our Creator? What is it okay to say? What is it not okay to say to the one who knows us better than we know ourselves? When my mind is blank and my heart feels empty, how am I supposed to keep praying? The Psalms are our jumpstart, our template, our playlist for letting our hearts out to God. They give us 150 examples, word upon word, of how we can enter into conversation with our Creator. When we do not have the words, these 150 chapters certainly contain something that we can put our voices to. And so over this last month, we've explored 4 ways that the Psalms help us to pray. In this book, we find psalms of praise, songs of help, songs of trust, and songs of thanks. If you take nothing else from this whole sermon series, take those 4 words. Take the mixtape card that we've created for you as you leave today and keep it handy, reminding you that each one of those words on its own, praise, help, trust, thanks, is a prayer. Use it when you need it. We'll wrap up today by learning our songs of thanks. What is it to say thank you? It's obviously important to us as humans because we work really hard to teach our kids to say it. When the server at a restaurant refills their drink, when someone gives them a gift, even if they don't like it, when someone pays them a compliment, when an act of kindness is done on their behalf. Why is it so important to us that those in our care learn this particular human behavior of thanking? What happens to us when we thank? On the level of civility and plain old manners, it is simply polite. But what makes it so? Saying thank you acknowledges another person. It recognizes someone outside of ourselves, and it notes that they have acted on our behalf. Generally speaking, left to our own devices, we would all be perfectly content to wallow in our own selves and situations and wants and needs. That's what humans do. If we're not taught otherwise, we center ourselves. But to say thank you means that we have taken note of someone other than ourselves. We have seen that we are now connected to them. It is no longer just me, myself, and I. saying thanks to other people keeps us in our place, which is not alone, connected, dependent on one another. Saying thanks to God is just as important as saying thanks to people, if not more so, because it functions exactly the same way, only on a cosmic level. When we thank God for the beauty we see around us, we find our rightful place as created ones, not creator. When we thank God for the catastrophe we've just narrowly escaped, we remember with gasps of air and a racing heart just how much we are not in control. When we thank God for what feels like undeserved blessing, the love of family, the presence of friends, the provision of community, we are shaped in the humility of being part of a greater whole. And when we thank God for the tiniest glimmer of hope or healing from those places of our deepest pain, we allow our broken hearts to be pulled ever so slightly toward that glimmer, because hope does not depend on us, we depend on hope. Saying thanks to God keeps us in our place, which is not alone, connected, dependent on God. For the most part, thanking God comes somewhat naturally to us. Even atheists and agnostics will offer up a breathless thank you, almost unconsciously, when the car running the red light narrowly misses their front bumper, when the fussy child finally drifts off to sleep, when the full harvest moon stops them in their tracks, demanding attention. In our deepest of deeps, we are tuned for gratitude, even if we don't put words or a recipient to it. Humans send it out to something bigger and beyond themselves. For us as people of faith, of course, we recognize God as the source of provision, protection, and prospering, and the Psalms model thanksgiving for us across a multitude of situations. You'll find words of thanks woven throughout many of the Psalms, which simply points us to the reality that gratitude is within reach in every moment of our lives. If we take a look at one psalm in particular today, we actually sang a version of it earlier, Psalm 136 shows us what this repetitive and ever-present gratitude might look like. I've taken out some verses from this psalm to make it a little bit shorter. It's still kind of long, but hopefully it still preserves the intent and the structure of the psalm. I'll invite you to read it responsively with me. Your part is very complicated. I hope you can remember it. But here is a song of Israel, remembering what God has done for them in the story of the Exodus and giving thanks. I'll read the first line each time and you can respond. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. Give thanks to the God of gods. Give thanks to the Lord of lords. To him alone who does great wonders, who by his understanding made the heavens, who spread out the earth upon the waters, who made the great lights, the sun to govern the day, the moon and stars to govern the night. We're going to keep going. To him who struck down the firstborn of Egypt and brought Israel out from among them with a mighty hand and outstretched arm. To him who divided the Red Sea asunder and brought Israel through the midst of it, but swept Pharaoh and his army into the Red Sea. To him who led his people through the wilderness. Hang on. To him who struck down great kings and gave their land as an inheritance to his servant Israel. He remembered us in our low estate and freed us from our enemies. He gives food to every creature. give thanks to the God of heaven. If there's one thing you remember from this psalm of thanks, when words might fail you or you don't know how to pray, what is it that you can say? This psalm begins and ends in thanks. It acknowledges God as source of several things throughout its whole structure. If you read it in the scripture, you can actually see it in 3 different parts. But above all, it names God as source of love, unending love. So in the midst of this entire story, everything from creation to captivity to freedom, the people of God are thanking God for a love that never ends. If you sat down and looked at this psalm on paper as a piece of poetry, which it is, in addition to that obvious repetitive refrain, you might notice other patterns in its literary structure. Not to get too English majory on you here, but the patterns in literature point us to the message. And in this case, the patterns help us focus in and think about what we are grateful, what we are thankful for. The last 3 verses we read give away the structure. The psalmist gives us 3 categories that sum up everything that has come before. All those things we said before are summed up in the last 3 lines. I'll put them up here again for you. He remembered us in our low estate, his love endures forever, and freed us from our enemies, his love endures forever. He gives food to every creature, his love endures forever. So what's cool about this is if you take those 3 categories, indulge me again with my alliterations, hang on, not forgetting, I think we have a slide, maybe we don't have a slide, freedom and food, and you flip those backwards through the psalm, you'll find that that's the order that these prayers of thanks come in. He gives food to every creature. The first 5 verses of this psalm reflect God's creative and providing nature, all the ways God has crafted and cared for what God has made. He freed us from our enemies. The middle section is all gratitude for the moments and the events that happened to free the Israelites from their enslavement in Egypt. And then he remembered, or he didn't forget, us in our low estate. The last verses all recall everything that God did to remove the kings and the barriers for this ragtag bunch of people who simply needed a place to call home. God did not abandon them, but brought them to a home. These 3 themes and their inverted structure throughout the psalm represent parallelism. It's a tool and a technique that you'll see all throughout the Psalms when you stop and look for it. It's literary in function, yes, but these tools serve a purpose. They draw us into what is important in these prayers. In this case, the structure focused on what we are giving God thanks for. Food, we have life and sustenance, thank you. Freedom, we are not bound by oppressors. And even when our spirits remain free because of the saving work of Christ. We can be free from our addictions, our negative self-talk, from relationships that are harmful. Freedom, thank you. And we are not forgotten. God remembers God's people. God does not leave us to our own devices. God does not bring us out of the impossible situation to freedom only to leave us to find our way alone. Where there is no way, God makes a way. Thank you. In this and in other psalms of thanks, we find themes and categories, examples of how we might say thank you and for what actions and provisions. What happens when we do say thank you, is that something within us changes. Every time we thank, our hearts do important work. The gratitude itself is some kind of miracle drug. It's a balm that almost always immediately soothes a troubled soul. The next time you are overcome with stress or fear or sadness, maybe that's even right now, focus your heart for a moment on what you can say thank you to God for. Even if it's the tiniest of things, say it and then see what happens. You will have stepped outside of yourself for a moment, however brief. You will have acknowledged a gift from a love that endures forever. And while your day may not be fixed, you will feel relief. It just works that way. At the very first church I served in Springfield, Missouri, there was a saint of a woman for whom gratitude was her lifeline. She and her husband were retired, had been for a number of years, and he required quite a bit of care by the time I met her. She dutifully cared for him without much help and without any thanks. I'm not sure their marriage was ever good, and the challenges in her husband's later years did not make it better. She had her own share of health issues that she often neglected. She had many disappointments in her life. She had a lot that weighed her down, and so she would come and spend a lot of time volunteering at church. I remember the first time she shared with me her strategy for making it through each difficult day. She told me she called it her grumpy gratitude journal. Every time she felt grumpy, which she admitted was often, indignant over her circumstances, angry about the suffering she was having to endure, and then frustrated with herself for feeling angry, she'd pull her grumpy gratitude book off the shelf and write down something that she was thankful for. She had volumes upon volumes of these journals on her shelf. This woman, should you meet her, is the kindest, gentlest, most humble human you will ever meet. She didn't have a mean bone in her body. It was hard to imagine her actually grumpy, but she felt it a lot. And yet, her practice and her commitment to gratitude had shaped her heart a different way. It made her humble because she was always aware of the bigger picture around her. And it made her generous, willing to serve, eager to give time and service and love toward others because she could count the pages upon pages of service, time, and love that had been given to her. She could see it on her shelf, and it made her want to give back. Saying thank you over and over to God for things grandiose and things mundane brings us to our knees. It takes us out of every other possible moment, past or future. It grounds us right here in today, in this moment, the only one we've really got, and begs us to be present. And when that thank you brings this moment into focus, we can stop and breathe. We can take note of who is around us. We can get a read on what is important to us right now and what should be. On our knees, we can see more clearly all the others kneeling around us too, what they long for, what they are afraid of, what they have just endured and overcome, what they need. We remember we are not in this alone. We have gratitude to offer God and grace to offer one another. Saying thank you may be the most human and holy thing we can say. As we close out this series, and I reflect back on the ways that our Psalms invite us to sing and to pray, I realize that each type invites us to an action, to a posture of prayer, so to speak. Psalms of praise invite us to shout. We did that in week 1. You can do it again whenever you need to. Psalms of help invite us to weep. Lament makes space for our tears and mourning. There is always a place for that here in this gathered body. Psalms of trust invite us to proclaim, to assure ourselves of the capability and the promises of the one we follow, to speak and to say we trust in the God who loves us. And Psalms of thanks, as I've just said, invite us to kneel, to place ourselves in a receiving posture where we have to take stock of all that has come to us as gift, all that we did not deserve, all that we could not provide for ourselves on the good days, the bad days, and everything in between. So these moments now are yours. I'm not going to fill them with words of my own prayer. I want to offer space and time and the invitation to your own action. If songs of thanks call you to kneel, then kneel. Let your body experience the thanks that your heart calls forth. During this song that the band will play, this space is open to you. This area here at the front is yours. If you want to come forward with extra space, come and kneel in thanks. If that's too far for you to go, you can turn right around at your own chair. Use your chair, turn around and kneel to offer your prayers. Feel the ground beneath you and make your prayers of thanks to God. This is a time of prayer for you.